I was out running errands the other day when I came across this fish salesman going on about having a sale on carp. I didn't really need one, but the deal seemed too good to pass up, so I bought one. Alright everybody, the moment is finally here. It's time to open up this bad boy and see what we've got. What? So naturally, I went back to get a refund. Well, that's unfortunate. Let's try to make the best of this. Welcome to Failing at Projects. To start, I cut out the template for the side profile and glued it to a block of basswood. Then, I took it to my bandsaw for a cutout, being careful not to cut too close to the lines. I used a small disc sander to trim the excess to the lines of the template, and then I used the detail sander to do the same for the mouth. Next, I cut out the top part of the template and glued it to the top of the lure so that one of the edges was aligned with the edge of the block. I used the big belt sander to reduce the width so both edges were flush with the sides of the template. Then, in the fiddliest way I know how, I drew some marks to use as guides for cutting the joint. Once the lines were roughly square, I used a jig to help me partially cut the joint at a 40-degree angle. Even though it's early in the process, I still don't want to tighten the vise too much so I don't damage the wood. It's important to make sure you secure your workpiece tightly in the vise so it doesn't fall and get damaged when it hits the floor. I don't need the block to be square anymore, so the next step was to go back to the bandsaw to cut the side profile of the carp. Then, I repeated the process of sanding the excess down to the template lines. With all four sides trimmed to roughly match the template, it was time to remove any remaining pieces of the template so I could draw lines to use to help carve the chamfers to round the corners. I did this using a utility knife and a carving glove for some imaginary safety. After the corners were carved, I clamped the lure back in the vise and used a file to refine the shape and smooth out the carving marks. Next, it was time to sand. First using coarse grit paper to finish shaping, then progressing through finer and finer grits to achieve a surface smooth enough for painting. used another less than ideal method to mark a center line around the top and bottom of the lure. That way I'd know where the joint cuts should meet. I didn't get it exactly in the middle, but I don't intend to use this lure, so it doesn't need to work well. Since I cut the joint, there were now more corners and surfaces that needed to be smoothed out. I decided to do the mouth next, so I started drawing lines where I'd need to do the detail carving. I did this using the same utility knife as before. I used a Dremel to hollow out the part of the mouth above the tongue. I'll spare you the footage, but after some more sanding, the mouth detail was done. For the fins, I used the bandsaw to cut some fin-shaped pieces out of a thick polycarbonate panel. These pieces were shaped using various files and sandpaper, similar to what I did with the wooden body before. a sanding attachment on the Dremel to taper the lower parts of the pectoral fins and the inner part of the tail. Next, I traced the outline of the fins onto the body of the lure and began cutting slots for the fins to sit in. I've only tried this once or twice before, so this was a very sloppy process, but I was able to fill in what I needed to later. I did some final sanding on the fins to get them ready for paint, and then it was time to move on to carving the rest of the details on the body. Using the template as a reference, I drew the lines I'd use to carve the detail. Then, just like with the mouth, I used the utility knife to carve everything. These detail lines are too small to use the Dremel, so I used a combination of files, sandpaper, and sanding sticks to finish the carvings. I held off on cutting the tail slot before because that was the one piece I actually felt confident in my ability to cut. That confidence was unfounded, but I got it done. With all the fin slots cut, the next step was to mark and drill holes for the joint connections, which I made using some stainless steel lock wire. The last step before sealing the wood was to make some holes to fill with lead to weigh the bottom of the lure. I started with a small drill bit, then used the Dremel to bore out the lead cavities. I cut off the excess lead with a utility knife. I didn't want to sand because that puts lead dust in the air and you don't want to breathe that. After the lead cooled, I filled in the holes with some thin super glue and baking soda, which I also used to patch a bad fin hole from earlier to give the fin a tighter fit. I used the same super glue to seal the wood. This hardens the wood to prevent damage, and it gives it some water protection. Super glue will cause polycarbonate to weaken and break, so I had to make sure that it all fully dried before attaching any fins. I used way too much UV epoxy to secure each fin to the body, putting it into my custom UV light oven to flash cure in between adding each fin. Once all the fins were flash cured, I put the whole thing in the oven for a long cure. Once the epoxy was fully cured, I cleaned up the excess, and then I added hardware for the line tie and hook hanger, which is almost entirely just for show on this lure. I also added some little bits of these chopped up fishing hooks that'll allow me to attach the whiskers later. The lure was finally ready for paint, so I laid down a white base over the entire thing. Next, I added the yellow paint to the top and bottom fins. I didn't worry about overspray because I knew it would be covered up by the orange body paint that went on last. Once the body was dry, it was time to hand brush the detail around the mouth and the eyes. I removed the masking tape from the eyes so I could add the outline. Once that had dried, I removed the rest of the masking tape and painted the final touches. To protect the paint and give the lure a glossy finish, I used the same UV epoxy from before to brush on a clear coat. After each piece was covered, I used the hand rotisserie to even out the resin before flash curing in the oven. After a long bake, the two halves were finally ready to be connected. So I glued in the joint connections I made earlier. A carp just isn't a carp without its whiskers, So, I cut pieces off of this silicone cable tie to do an okay job of imitating some. The last thing it needed was a hook, so I added one in the only place on the lure where it would fit. And that's a finished fish. Let's see the before and after.